Hello. Thank you for having me here. It is an honor to be with you. My name is Tanya Polstra, and I am the Executive Director of Deaf Kids Connect. We are also Silent Blessings Ministry. It's an organization that was started 27 years ago, and we are in the transition of becoming Deaf Kids Connect. And if you are interested in knowing more about why, you can check out our website. Our mission is to reach families with deaf and hard of hearing children. Here on the screen, you can see a scale of hearing loss. Deafness is not the same between each person. There is a spectrum of hearing loss. When a mom is pregnant, they have a dream, a vision of what their family's going to look like. Maybe music is an important part of their family, and they have a dream of what their child might become. And then at the hospital, when the baby is born, they do a mandatory hearing screening test. And typically, it's in the same room as the mom, or sometimes they'll bring the baby back into a different room and they do the hearing test. And when that baby is identified as a baby with hearing loss, if it's one ear that has hearing loss, it's unilateral. If it's both ears, it's bilateral. My son, he's 6, he's been identified with a unilateral hearing loss. He is deaf on the left ear, and he has normal hearing in his right ear. And once they identify that hearing loss, they do a series of tests to continue to identify what type of hearing loss they have. And that's when they come and they notify parents and they say, your child passed the hearing test or your child failed the hearing test. And that's when a parent meets a deaf person for the first time often. It's their own baby. And then they're referred to go to other tests. And I want to share this picture of my daughter, my youngest. She's 2. And when she was born, we were told that she failed her hearing test. She's the first girl in our family that has an identification as deafness. And they told us, we did the test 2 times and she failed. But as a deaf person, I was already prepared. I wasn't distraught. I wasn't confused. I grew up deaf. My mom was deaf. I already had the background and the knowledge and the preparation. But hearing parents, they don't know what to expect. They have questions. And they begin a grieving process because they believe their child has lost their hearing, or they've been told your child has hearing loss. But it wasn't lost to begin with. And when we found out that our daughter was deaf, I could share the whole story, but we would be here much longer than that. But I knew the resources that I needed to go to. The nurse told us, we're going to refer you to see an audiologist. That audiology exam will take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, depending on the test itself. And we really want to make sure to identify what spectrum of hearing loss she has. And we want to know what decibels she can hear. And then we'll refer you further for other follow-up appointments, audiologists, ENTs, etc. And I said, okay. So that's what was next. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks, and we were referred to see an audiologist. And then we were told, don't feed your baby, because we want her to be asleep, and we don't want the baby to be crying. No, we want the baby to be asleep and quiet so that they can see. You can see in the picture where they put monitors on her, and they test her access to sound. And it took 3 hours. I'd rock her. If she started crying, we had to stop the test until she fell asleep again, and we would restart the test. And sure enough, they're like, she has a profound hearing loss in both ears. And I said, okay. And they said, we refer you to see another specialist. And I said, no, thank you. We don't need that. Because the other specialist was going to be seeking other alternatives like cochlear implants, hearing aids, things that would help her develop speech and hearing therapy. And we knew she was profoundly deaf, and we had resources. But hearing parents don't have access to their resources. In this moment, they're faced with enormous grief. This is my dear friend. Her name is Brittany, and she's from Cleveland, Ohio. She actually now lives in Oklahoma, and I'm going to show a brief clip of her story. And the entire clip is 10 minutes long, but I'm only going to show you about 3 minutes. And you're going to meet her son, Mac, and you're going to hear about the time that she met him for the first time and when she learned that he was deaf. And I want her to be able to share her story. But I hope you can see the differences between me meeting my deaf child as a deaf parent and having resources to her meeting her deaf child as a hearing parent and not having access to resources, and what her experience and journey was like.
Hi, my name is Brittany Stacy, and here is a little bit of my story. Having a deaf son is such a gift, but I did not always think of it that way. My husband, Pete, and I found out our second son, Mac, was deaf very
Is the video not working? Oh, the internet is down. They're trying to restore the internet. Should I just go ahead? Father, it's evident that there's even spiritual warfare right now.
Hi, my name is Brittany Stacy, and here is a little bit of my story. Having a deaf son is such a gift, but I did not always think of it that way. My husband, Pete, and I found out our second son, Mac, was deaf very early on. Mac took and failed a hearing test in the hospital the day he was born. Due to the "it's probably nothing" attitude of the medical staff and the fact that
and he had a hearing test. So I'll make sure to email everybody a link to the YouTube video, but let me just share a little bit of Brittany and Mac's story. At the hospital, Mac was identified as deaf, and the nurse was like, it's probably nothing. And so they thought, okay, it's probably nothing. And so they continued, and the husband reminded Brittany, remember Mac, his hearing test? And she said, you know what, okay, let's take her to the doctor. And they told her the same thing: don't feed your baby. They need to be very hungry, and they need to be able to sleep. And Brittany was disturbed, like, I don't want to not feed my baby. But she dealt with it, and they got there, and he fell asleep, and they did the test, and they sat down with her, and they said, we did this hearing test, and when we look at Mac and on the spectrum, his brain's not making any response to sound. But she didn't really understand that meant her baby was deaf. And she thought, okay, well, God's going to take care of this, and continued to live their life. And while she was driving home, and as she was thinking and trying to process the experience there at the audiologist office, and the baby is sitting in the back in the car seat, and he's crying and crying, and Brittany's feeling extreme pressure as she's trying to process everything. And, just 3 weeks before the audiology exam, there was a song that she had turned on thinking that would help the baby calm down. And when she started to sing that song, it finally dawned on her, he can't hear me. And she became emotional and started crying. And as she's still processing what's happening and driving home, and as a mom, our emotions, her son is sitting right behind her. He's right there, but she felt that he was a million miles away. That's how she felt. He couldn't hear her. And in that moment, in that crisis, she felt like he had been put in a soundproof box without a key, and nobody could access him. And so that's a summary of that video. We have 96% of deaf children that are born into hearing families. And I really want us to think about when parents meet their deaf child for the first time, or when they learn that their child is deaf for the first time, they have questions. What does it mean to be deaf? How long do deaf people live? Do they have to be put into a mental health facility? They don't have any idea. They don't know where to go to. And oftentimes they turn to the church. But what's unfortunate is the church doesn't know what to do. And they move on, still having no one to help. So then they go to the medical professionals that don't have a connection with the deaf community. And the medical professionals give them advice that focuses on trying to help fix their hearing and trying to help fix their speech. But we know that God says that deaf people are fearfully and wonderfully made. But deaf people don't grow up knowing that or believing that, because they feel like they're invisible. My disability is invisible. When you see me on the street, I look like a normal person until I start signing to you. And then many hearing people just start walking away. They don't take time to develop a relationship. And so these parents of deaf children are unreached. We often talk about deaf people groups are unreached, but parents of deaf people are unreached. Who's going to tell them about Jesus? Who's going to tell them, I'm going to walk this road with you? Who's going to connect them to deaf leaders? These parents often find themselves stuck in situations with no resources. We have 34 million deaf children around the world. And are these parents ready? Do they have access to these resources? And they don't, because they don't even know what it means to be deaf. Are there ministry resources out there? We have lots of disability ministries with leaders and resources, but when you look at the resources for deaf ministries and for deaf families and for parents with deaf children, they don't have that. They just point them over, okay, well, let's find you this disability ministry. Where do we belong as deaf people in the church? And it's time for us as the church to be ready to work together to make a change. So not only do we have 34 million deaf children around the world, we have 70 million deaf people around the world. 34 million deaf children, that's our future generation. That's the next generation. Isaiah was very clear. When I share with this next generation, there's no guarantee that they're going to pass it on to the next and then the next and the next generation. But I want to have the confidence that my next generation of deaf children is going to be able to share the good news of Jesus so that more deaf people will know who God is. Imagine with me, we often say, oh, you're deaf. And with that comes this idea that they're not good enough. We recognize that people with disabilities are fearfully and wonderfully made, but yet deaf people aren't good enough if they can't hear or speak. We often tell them when they come into church, let's pray for healing over you. We're going to pray that you can hear again. You know how many times I've experienced that as a deaf woman? Do you know how many times I've cried out to God and say, God, can you heal me of my deafness? Why did I feel the need to ask him that? Because of how people treated me growing up. But now I know that he created me. He gave me the gift of a visual language. He gave me a community. He designed relationships. Why don't we embrace that? Why do we think that they have to do all of these other things to be accepted into our hearing community? When we look at this map, God designed and created 300 sign languages around the world, more than 300 sign languages. He made deaf people for his glory. In John chapter 9, the disciples asked Jesus, why was this blind man deaf? Or why was this man born blind? Did his parents sin? Did he sin? And God said, no, it's for my glory. And if we are continued to be hidden and marginalized and oppressed, we're putting a limit on God's glory. And it's time for the church to wake up and look for opportunities to connect with deaf leaders. I would like to give you some tips. But before I do that, I need you to recognize something. I need you to recognize that deaf people are suffering from barriers of communication, from neglect, from judgment, because they simply cannot hear, which means we have labeled them not good enough. This is the world of deaf children. This is what they experience day to day. For security reasons, I'm not going to name the country that I'm going to share this story with. But there is a child that was burned alive because they were deaf. And as a deaf person, these are my people. These are my children. And Jesus prayed in John chapter 7, may we work in unity so that others can know that we are his. Are we working together in unity? I can't answer that for you, but I don't see it. if this list even exists. I'm not okay with this. I'm not okay that this is the state of deaf children all around the world. I'm not okay with parents of deaf children feeling grief and fear because they're being told all of these negative paradigms about deafness. And then when they go to the church lines up with the medical point of view. I'm not okay with that. I am asking you to take a moment to search your heart and think with me, are we okay with this? This is my sweet daughter. I got to brag on her. She is so independent, loves picking out her clothes. She loves dressing up like a princess. She is the princess in the house. And I honestly didn't plan on having a third child, but God gave me her. And honestly, if he didn't, I might not be here with you guys today. On average, it takes a child 1 to 2 years before they identify that they are someone. So at the age of 1 or 2, they realize, oh, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a person. I have a relationship. So that's on average. On average, a deaf person does not recognize that they are someone until they reach adulthood. They grow up their entire lives thinking, I can't lead, I can't do this, until they finally meet someone as an adult. I know you guys have gotten to hear from Brandon, the founder of Deaf Millennial Project, and as Deaf Kids Connect, we love Deaf Millennial Project because we see deaf kids that grow up isolated and alone, thinking they're the only deaf person in the world. And then they find another deaf person, and then they realize, wait, it's not just 2 of us, there's 70 million deaf people out there. And then they're like, well, okay, then who's this God? And what does this God think about me? But then their trauma influences their perspective of who God is. But then there's not even access to counseling and resources for deaf children. Please find a deaf leader in your community and expect to be blessed by that relationship, but also expect that there's going to be hurt and pain and trauma because very few people have looked at that deaf person and have valued them for who they are. And instead of making them accommodate you, take the effort to accommodate them. Can we go to the next slide? Here at Deaf Kids Connect, we have 2 different workshops. One is for parents to help them process their trauma, their grief, their views, and we can help encourage them and support them in finding a network and connecting with other parents of deaf children, other resources, churches, but then we also offer training for church and ministry leaders. What can you do when a family with a deaf child comes into your congregation? We can provide you with training. We can help you prepare. We can help you think through what you might need to do to love this family well. And then we have incredible ministry partners that their entire mission is to help deaf and hard of hearing individuals. All of their links are available on our website. And when you click on their logo, it'll direct you to their individual website. And that can also help you with further resources like Sunshine Interpreting. Okay, so how do I have a conversation with a deaf person? I don't know sign language. Contact Sunshine. They have incredible resources on that. They have an incredible interpreting network. They can help connect you with people that are in your area. They can also help you connect with local interpreter agencies. There's incredible resources there. So check out our website and find what you need. I know it's hard to summarize all of this in 15 minutes, and I'm sorry the video did not work, but please take a picture of the QR code, find our website. We are here to serve you and your families with deaf children because deaf children need you. They need role models. They need deaf leaders also as role models. Help come alongside deaf leaders and do this ministry with them, and because together we can go much farther. And if we want to go fast, then go ahead and go alone. But I don't want to go fast. I want to go with you. I want us to do this together. Thank you.